Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another segment of Pamela Roth Live. I'm hoping everybody is having and has had a very happy and safe Labor Day weekend. Cannot believe it's the end of the summer. I feel like it just started and it's gone. So, welcome to everybody. It is Monday, Labor Day, September 5, 2022. And I would like to welcome our guest, Tim Sutton. Tim Sutton is a law enforcement officer in Virginia for the past 23 years. He is also an advocate and a consultant in autism awareness and Alzheimer's disease. And Tim is going to be speaking with us because he has had extensive training in recognizing autism in children and adults. Unfortunately, people who have autism, when they come into contact with law enforcement, it is not a disease or a situation where law enforcement officers can actually recognize the fact that somebody does have autism or Alzheimer's. And so there is a lack of communication. There's also a lack of understanding and training, which needs to be corrected across the board, across this country, with all law enforcement agencies, police agencies, departments of correction, and anyone who wears a badge. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Tim Sutton.
Hey, Pamela. Thanks for having me.
No problem. It's a pleasure. So besides the little intro, I would love for you to explain to everybody and introduce yourself as to your training and your background.
Okay. Actually, I've been in law enforcement for on my 34th year. And for the past 20 or so, I've been doing a lot of work with people, with families dealing with disabilities, which I prefer to call differabilities. Everybody has an ability or different abilities, but they have these abilities, but they do things differently, maybe. So I am a patrol sergeant for an agency here in Virginia. I'm out on the road with the deputies and handling the calls for service. And back in 2002, I got approached by my sheriff at the time, and he just came up to me and told me I was going to run a program. And I asked him what the program was, and he said, well, it helps you find missing people. Well, if you're familiar at all with autism, other cognitive disorders, Alzheimer's, you'll know that there's an issue of them eloping and wandering away, getting away from their caregiver or parents. And unfortunately, you end up having to do search and rescue missions. We had one of the largest in Virginia in 2011. We had a 9-year-old with autism, non-speaking, who went missing for 5.5 days. And we actually found him alive. I think he just got tired. He was in a huge Civil War park. But as I went out and started meeting the families, what I was doing was putting a watch-size transmitter on their ankle or their leg or whatever that sent a signal out about a mile, and they would wear it 24/7. If they went missing, the caregiver would call 911, and I had a team of officers. We'd come out and start conducting a search. But while the elopement and wandering were issues with these populations, I also realized that there were so many other things going on, and many times it solicited a law enforcement response where the child with autism became an adult with autism, had a meltdown, family didn't know what to do. So what does everybody do? They call 911. And the reason they call 911 is because we show up. And we go into these situations and we revert back to our training. We do the best job we can dealing with the situation, dealing with the person with the meltdown on the spectrum, but we had not been trained on understanding autism, other intellectual disabilities. So the way we weren't doing our job as effectively as possible. So seeing the need and the concern in these parents and families, number one, with interacting with law enforcement. An individual with autism is actually 7 times more likely to have an encounter with law enforcement than a neurotypical individual. So I just set out, and with Alzheimer's and autism, I developed curriculum, worked a lot in the state, started traveling the country, just training people to understand these disabilities. Because like you said before, autism, unless there's an underlying issue, they don't look any different than anybody else. So they appear to be, general population, but they may have some behaviors you can pick up on. But if you don't know about the behaviors, you're not going to pick up on.
Well, one of the things I want to do right now is, first of all, I want to apologize to both you and to Anthony behind the scene, as well as to my listening and viewing audience, I did not mean to use the word disease referring to autism. And it's more of, like you said, a cognitive disorder and a disability.
Right.
So I misspoke on that point. So I just wanted to clear that air. But as you said, without training, it's very difficult to recognize any of these characteristics with an individual or a child with autism. And
Right. And what I do is just try to teach some of the behaviors. I'm not a doctor. I don't teach the medical aspect, things like that. But according to the CDC, the autism rate right now is 1 in 44 births. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be out in the public. And law enforcement, my number one thing was to train law enforcement because we have the tools that hurt people and take lives. But I honestly believe that anybody that comes in contact with the public needs to understand the disorder and these other disabilities.
well, it's my understanding from speaking to you off camera is that you do go around the country at speaking engagements and law enforcement agencies around the country, training them in recognizing individuals with autism and what the characteristics are. Because the big problem that you have stated to me in the past is that somebody who has autism, if they're non responsive to in a police encounter, even if it's just a wellness check, it can escalate where it appears that they are refusing to obey an order or refusing to stop or actually communicate with police officers.
Right.
Unfortunately, a lot of times it arises in that individual being shot and hurt and severely wounded.
Right. And a lot of it, and we've talked about it before with law enforcement. Sometimes and most times there's an ego element, and you go up to somebody and you try to carry on a conversation.
Mhm.
One aspect of autism is called echolalia, where they repeat what you say. Now, if it's 2 o'clock in the morning and an officer sees some adult standing on the side of the road humming or flapping his hands, and the officer walks up and says, "What are you doing?" And the response is, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I need an ID. Show me your ID." And he says, "Show me your ID." You can see how that could escalate. And where if you had some training and you pulled up and saw them humming or heard them humming or flapping their hands, stemming, then maybe that would tip you off to that person with autism or some other type of disability. But it's the tough thing is, and I know we're going to be talking about it, is the bullying aspect. It is an invisible disorder, like I said, unless there's underlying circumstance.
Mhm.
And when you think about, well, autism, the three areas, there are social challenges, usually communication challenges, and repetitive behavior challenges, but they don't look any different than anybody else. But think about the bullying. Who usually gets bullied?
The weaker child, the one who stays to him or herself, the
Different.
one who doesn't seem to have the same social skills of wanting to participate with the group. And then, growing up, we always said, oh, leave Billy or Janie alone. They just want to be alone. And it was always classified as the loner in the
Right.
classroom. But there was never any teaching. I look back to, days that I was in school. There was never any teaching or explaining that Billy or Janie may have, being socially awkward was
Right.
always labeled like, oh, he or she is a loner. They don't play well with others. And
And
that's
they
the
get
person who gets bullied.
Yeah, they get picked on and bullied, and some people don't realize, some of it's very subtle. And one of the boys, he's actually an adult now. I've known him. He's 23, 24. I've known him since he was 6. But it's little things like a group of kids, they have a pizza and they say, "Hey, come over here. You want a piece of pizza?" And the person with autism is like, "Sure." Walks over there and they said, "No, you can't have it." And it's those subtle type of things. And I actually had that same boy when he graduated high school. His mom was going to community college, and he actually enrolled in community college. And they actually she registered for one of the classes in her maiden name. She did not want anybody to know her son was in the class. She wanted him to develop his own independence. And the only other person that knew was her best friend who was in the class with her. Well, they went to the first day of class, and this boy loves asking questions. Well, he starts off at the beginning of class raising his hand, asking a question, and continuously over and over was raising his hand. Mom's sitting in the back, and she saw all of these, everybody in the class just starts pointing at him and laughing and joking, making fun of it. And it got to the point where she couldn't take it anymore. And she left the class, and her friend told everybody, said, "Y'all need to be ashamed of yourself. That's her son." Well, everybody, she's sitting outside crying, and everybody starts to come out saying, "Oh, we're so sorry. We're so sorry." Teacher comes out, said, "Please come on back in." And she said, "No, I can't sit through this class tonight." And she got to thinking about all the times during high school when he would come home and tell her about, yeah, so and so said this, or they asked me if I wanted pizza and then they wouldn't give me any. And she had blown it off. And finally, her son came outside and said, "Mom, I'm going back in there. I'm holding my head high and I'm going back into class." And she said at that point, she realized he was a more of a man than she ever expected him to become. But, the parents need to listen to the stories that the kids are telling them. And the sad thing is with autism, there are studies that say about 40% of people with autism are non-speaking. It used to be nonverbal, but when they squeal or scream, that is a verbalization. But they're non-speaking. So who are they going to tell?
Excuse me.
How is anybody going to know if they can't tell or can't articulate what they're dealing with?
Well, you know something, Tim, it also goes back, and you've seen it in movies when they show high school movies. You know, there's always that one boy or one girl that when they're selecting for a team,
Right.
whether it's the cheerleaders or basketball team or dodgeball, it's like, oh, don't pick Billy. Nobody wants to pick Billy, and Billy's
Right.
sitting there on the bench, and then finally someone takes him because you had no choice. That's also another form of bullying.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you look through it, and they even show it, and everybody laughs about it when you see high school movies, or even the movie Dodgeball from years ago.
Right.
That's all, when you think back on it, getting pushed down on playground,
Right.
um, not getting selected, and being made to feel that you're only being selected because the person has no choice, the team has no choice. But also, can I ask you this? Is there a higher level of suicide amongst people or individuals with autism?
Myself and a couple other people actually trying to research that, and from what I can tell, it seems like it is, because people with autism, especially if they're higher end of the spectrum, where they can hold down jobs and do pretty much the same things. And in schools, many of them are mainstream. There's no aid with them. They're just that kid with the quirky behavior, but they want the same thing everybody else has. They want boyfriends, they want girlfriends, they want friends.
They want
And
acceptance. They want to be involved. They want to be included.
and see, many times when people reach out, they give them attention. Maybe it's not good attention, or maybe they're trying to suck them in to go do something for them that they know they're not supposed to do. They want friends, and they see any attention as, "I have friends. They like me." So that, and then you get parents. And I actually had a mom call me one time because her son was a senior in high school. He was on the spectrum. His best friend had just graduated the year before and was at college. He's got autism. Well, he was crying all year because he had no friends. And you're talking a senior in high school. And he came home one day on the high school bus, and came running in the house to mom, had a piece of paper, and in crayon it said, "Will you be my friend? Yes, no." And he was so happy somebody wanted to be his friend. I mean, just, and she's thinking, okay, it's a high school bus, this little note's written in crayon, "Honey, I think somebody he would not accept it." And you think about how heartbreaking that is for a parent having to explain, "I don't think they were serious. I think they were playing." That just crushes me thinking about it happening.
Well, one of the other things that we were discussing is that, of course, with bullying starts at a young age, from the time you're in kindergarten, first grade, and throughout grade school. And
Right.
of course, as the kids get older, as bullies, the teasing becomes more hurtful because it could be not just verbal, but could also become physical. The
Right.
pushing someone down, grabbing somebody's backpack off of their shoulders,
Right.
all in the name of, oh, I was just joking.
Right.
But then, it gets to the point where, as bullies get older, they don't outgrow that behavior, being that it was never stopped and controlled when they were younger because nobody ever told them, you're not supposed to be doing this. Then these so called bullies go on into positions of authority where
Right.
now, because of their position, whether it's a CEO in a company and they're your employer, your boss, or
Right.
they're various factions of the military, or in law enforcement, Department of Corrections, and all, because now they have the badge or the title
Right.
behind them that kind of insulates them. So nobody's going to really think that they're a bully because they're in this position. Have
Right.
you seen that over the years, traveling around the country, as far as how that affects people who are now adults who have autism?
Well, I have to choose my words very delicately. I think those individuals who move into those supervisory type positions, they're the ones that become the managers
Yes.
as opposed to leaders. Um, you've got a group of people that you're trying to lead, but there's so much management and micromanagement that they can't leave well enough alone. And I think that's where you sometimes differentiate between having that manager or leader. But any manager is going to tell you they're a great leader. They're just their image of themselves and their capabilities is sometimes skewed. But yeah, I have seen that, and I've worked with people like that. And as a supervisor myself, I just have to be cognizant of it and make sure, that I had good supervisors and I had bad supervisors. The good ones I've had were leaders, and I've always wanted to emulate them. The ones that were managers and micromanaging, and you know, I said whatever they do, I will not do. I will not do. But yeah, it lends itself to that opportunity, perfect opportunity for a bully to feel legitimized, I guess, if you want to say, and telling people what to do.
But with respect to more so as individuals with autism, how is it possible that they become targets and victims of possible crimes without even knowing they're committing a crime? Have you come across that in your training and your experience as an
They,
officer?
they get manipulated because the people that are giving them attention, they feel like they're my friend. They're giving me attention, and you can actually research the all across the well, it's probably all across the world. Individuals with autism are being approached to join gangs because, and they love it because this is a group of people that are accepting me and they like me, and we get to party, we get to do drink whatever they do, but they're also the one where they say, "Hey, I need you to go down the street, take this package, and I want you to go to this address. Just stick it in the mailbox for me, and come on back. We're gonna have a party." And so they end up being that mule that's transporting drugs and doing different things. Or, you know, people don't seem to understand. And I've done some training at colleges because with autism, they're brilliant. So there are so many people in colleges with autism, but when the fraternities see this one guy that kind of stands out as a little bit different and he wants to belong, so he gets in a fraternity and he's always the go to, hey, go get us some beer. Hey, go get this. And, he's wiping out his savings account, checking account because I've got friends. So I'll go and, nobody's offering to give him money, but he's coming back with stuff for the group or the gang. And yeah, there are a lot of gangs out there reaching out. And I believe there are terrorist cells actually looking for people online because here's somebody reaching out to me. They want to talk to me, learn about me, and we're communicating back and forth. And then it's subtle things. Hey, do this. I want you to try to do this, and they do it on a computer. Great job. See if you can do this. And they've got them breaking into financial institutions, but it ends up being they're just being exploited for their disability.
Now, is there any way have you ever had any encounters with any individuals with autism who have been part of a crime without even knowing that they were committing a crime?
I am familiar with quite a few, and you find out that there's no malice, but they still get prosecuted. And and that's why I think this kind of training needs to be all the way through the judicial system. Your magistrates, judges, attorneys, everybody need to understand
Right.
this.
The
Yeah, just
prosecutors,
because,
the prosecutors as well, because as a former prosecutor, we only know what it is that the police officers are bringing to us.
right,
So a police officer has any type of training to recognize that this individual who they arrested and charged with a crime has autism, depending on what level you set on the spectrum.
right,
Now,
right,
as a prosecutor, I'm just going to go through the paperwork because, for instance, I had a situation that was just so horrendous. I actually needed to take a couple of days off from work
right,
when I was in the DA's office. Again, the police officer, as you've dealt with prosecutors. Police officer comes and makes an arrest. I'm going through, the paperwork. I'm
Right.
interviewing the police officer, and on this particular day, I was a prosecutor in Brooklyn, Kings County DA's office, and so give my props out to my former office. But there was a police officer who made an arrest for unlawful possession of a weapon, criminal possession of a weapon.
Right.
So I'm going through the whole litany of questions with him, and he goes, "Yes, I made the arrest. I had probable cause. I saw the outline of a hard object, you know, on his waist, etc., etc." So we go through all of that and determine that there was probable cause for the arrest. Okay, put the case goes into the grand jury, and
Right.
at that time, the officer was questioned, and he laid out the fact that what he believed to have probable cause. Now he steps out, and it turns out that this young African American male, he had to be maybe like 18 or 19 at the time, through his defense attorney, stated that he wanted to make a statement in the grand jury. Fine, no problem. Now, I had explained to him as he was sitting there, you're gonna tell, your name, your date of birth, or where
Right.
you live, and just go through your whole side of the story. I'm not going to interrupt you. So now my back was turned, and I'm just watching and standing out, looking over at the faces of the members of the grand jury at the time, and just gauging their reaction. The entire time, I actually wasn't even really looking at him. I was just,
Right.
listening. And at one point, when he was speaking, I'll never forget this. He said, "And I couldn't hold a gun. I didn't have a gun because I can't hold a gun because of this." Now my back was turned, so I don't know what because of this meant, but I
Right.
saw faces with eyes popping open, mouths agape, with the type of reaction. I'm like, what's going on? I turn around. He holds up his hands, and he had polydactylism. His fingers were webbed like a duck. So
Wow.
he did not have separate fingers.
Right.
Turned around. I literally, I had to, regain my composure for a second, because all I kept thinking to myself was, of course, the police officer never put this down as far as any special characteristics on the
Right.
paperwork. And, at this point, I still had to go through all my questioning of, like, how do you feed yourself? How do you hold a pen? And he's trying to show all this. And, I felt awful because I
Right.
didn't want to put him on the spot, but I still have to do my job.
Right.
And so
And
going through all these questions, and of course, when we stepped outside for the members of the grand jury to vote whether it was going to be, an indictment or no indictment, as I'm standing outside, I was trying to keep the tears back, and I apologized. And this is before I even knew they were going to blow it out.
right.
No true bill. And I looked at him, and I had said to his attorney, I said, "Can I please say something to your client?" He goes, "You're a prosecutor. You can't speak to him." I go, "I'm going to speak to him in front of you. The only thing I want to say is, from the bottom of my heart, I apologize." I said, "Because I had known any of this, I never would have put this case into the grand
Right.
jury. I would have tossed it."
Right. And see, I
It
get
was
asked
it
that
was
a
a
lot.
bad, it was a bad arrest. It was a bad arrest. The whole question came down. The gun was planted on him, but I
Right.
felt so awful for putting him on the spot because of his disability. That was
Right.
clear. It was so obvious.
Right.
I took 3 days off after that, just because I was like, it was just too much. It was just too
Right.
emotional to realize
And the thing
that.
with I'm not saying people with autism or disabilities should not be
Right.
arrested. It's case by case, and you really need to you need to be able to prove that intent. And sometimes an arrest may not be the best course of action for that person, because what's going to end up happening with anybody on the spectrum, they're a little different. They're put into a correction facility, and they're going to become victimized in there. So sometimes it's not necessarily the best course of action when the arrest is there. Sometimes you have to. You don't have a choice. But it's case by case.
Right, but you put an individual in who has autism, like you said too, depending on where he is on the spectrum,
Right.
they're now going to become a victim inside a jail cell, because it's not a one-on-one jail cell. You got at least maybe
Yeah.
20 at a minimum, and more people in there that are going to look upon that person and see that they have a new target now,
And
especially
that's why
because you have gang. Right.
corrections officers need to know about autism. How many people do you think now across the country are incarcerated who are on the spectrum? And maybe it was not the right course of action. Some of them it was. But back to the issue, I think we kind of skirted it, the suicide issue.
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of depression involved with autism. They have the same mental health issues as everybody else. And I'm still researching, trying to see about the rate. But I'll tell you another area that's very high suicide rate are siblings of individuals with autism or disability,
And why is that?
because over the years, the neurotypical child sees so much attention having to be given to the one with autism, and they get kind of neglected, not on purpose. It's just because their brother or sister had a special need and they needed more attention, and they do feel left out. Like my parents care more about my brother with autism than they do me because they don't do this. They're always with him. They're always doing. And there's a lot of depression and suicide due to that fact. They feel like they don't matter.
Well, I think it would also possibly be resentment toward the sibling too.
Yes, and there
Like-
is a lot of that too. So
And
it's
also,
I think the rates are up, but it's like I said, I'm in the process trying to research it.
no, it's a sad situation, but it comes down to, as we have keep mentioning, there has to be training and more awareness of this. And I actually believe that in schools, I know there are anti-bullying programs in schools, and that
Right.
started over the last number of years. I know, obviously, when life was different before COVID, um, before the pandemic, I had a guest on one of my prior podcasts with another studio. I had brought in this gentleman who started a campaign of anti-bullying out in Staten Island because his niece kept complaining that to the school and to her parents that she was being bullied by these other girls in class. And it was a very sad situation because, as young girls start developing, some may start to wear a bra before the others. And, you get the snapping of the bra from behind, and then the boys do it as well. And a couple of the girls who she thought were her friends said, "Oh, let's all take pictures in our bras and panties." So she, believing it was her friends not wanting to do anything bad to her, then took those pictures and plastered them all over social media and posters around the school saying, Mary Jane is a slut. And
Right.
and this was done by her friends, and the teasing and the name calling and everything else was too much for her. She complained to
Right.
the school. School did nothing about it. She complained to her parents, and they were like, "Oh, it's just kids, it'll go away." And
Yeah.
unfortunately, one morning when she kissed everybody goodbye to go outside to go walk to the school bus, she walked in front of the bus and she just ended it. And I had him on as a guest, and it was just so heartbreaking because so much could have been done before that. So while anti-bullying programs, are discussed in school, I believe also from a young age they should also bring about autism awareness so that you could recognize this with your classmates, and the teachers in the schools could recognize it too because it goes hand in hand with bullying.
Yeah, I will. I started with law enforcement training, but I've spoken to medical professionals, different, colleges, some of the colleges,
Right.
faculty, and stuff. So I'm willing to speak to or teach any audience, and they can find me if you go on the web, tim-sutton.com. That'll take you to my website. Um, Feel free to contact me. But I'm actually working with some other individuals. We've just formed a nonprofit here locally in Richmond, and it's called A Better Understanding. You can find it at betterunderstanding.org. But one of the things we're doing, we're trying to raise awareness for all disabilities, get people to acknowledge it, and we try to advocate for those our friends with disabilities, and try to also teach them because they need to know how to advocate for themselves. So we're having parties, dance parties, and we've got group homes coming. We did one 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they are so appreciative because we're having parties that they can be a part of. Because typically they're the ones that send that invitation out for a birthday party, nobody shows up,
Right.
or they don't get invited to the parties. But we're doing things exclusively for people with, like I said earlier, differabilities, big events for them. So check us out, and I think everybody needs a better understanding.
Well, any of these events, I know if they're held in Virginia, if you give me enough notice, I'll put it on my calendar to actually
Okay.
make it down there because I really would like to get more involved with this with you in Virginia, as well as if you take it more toward the East Coast,
Yeah.
toward the New York area, it would be terrific. But as we were discussing too, anybody who, when these kids who have autism and they're bullied, some of them, like you said, can't communicate. So how is it that they're able to let anybody know that they are bullied, or do they recognize the fact that they're being bullied, or do they just think that these people are trying to be their friends?
Well, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Every single one's different. Some of them may recognize it.
Mhm.
But I think it's up to the teachers and the parents to be able to pick up on some things, because a lot of things change once the bullying starts. Some of the stuff I was reading, the appetite changes, they start having headaches, don't feel good, um, the stomach aches, and all of these little things. They just see some behavioral changes that are not what they were. We just need to be aware of it and be observant and pick up on these things. But yeah, like you said, and somebody may be verbal or speaking with autism, but they have a hard time articulating exactly what's being done. And then again, yeah, they think these are my friends. They pay me attention. They pay attention to me. They invite me here, invite me there, but they're being used. So each person, it's up to us, you know, that know something about it. When we see something, we need to do something about it. Anybody, whether it's a parent or you're just out, in public and you see something going on, it's like, that's not right. We need to intervene.
No, speaking of that, I had mentioned to you, I've seen and I've been informed that even individuals who have other handicaps or other disabilities that are in wheelchairs, for instance, and unfortunately, you have people now, individuals who are in wheelchairs who are becoming victims of crime.
Right.
They literally, no one believes, for instance, that they can't walk, that they're in a wheelchair. So what do? They'll get ganged up on and get tipped
Right.
over, and told, get up, walk. We don't believe you can't walk. But
Right.
so many nowadays, with the way the crime is across the country, what's really insane to think about these individuals who already have so many challenges they face,
Right.
whether they're blind or deaf or have the physical disabilities of being in a wheelchair, to think that
Right.
they would actually now be victimized and be a victim of a crime is just something for me that I can't fathom why
Well,
anybody.
you've been a prosecutor. I mean, there are just evil people out there, and it's not going away. It's just evil people.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate because these people have enough challenges to deal with, and on top of it all, now they have to be victimized even more.
Right.
But
Right.
like you said, you see things going on in the community, don't just walk away, do something about it.
Right. Well, I appreciate you having me on to share all this information. And people can contact me, get in touch with me through my website. I'd be glad to talk to them, or come on any other shows. So I appreciate your
Absolutely.
opportunity.
Just
I appreciate it.
Tim, before you jump off, just give us that website again for anybody who's interested to be in touch
Oh,
with you, better
yeah,
understand.
my website is tim-sutton.com. And it kind of goes into why I do what I do, why I teach, why I do all of these things. And also check out a betterunderstanding.org. That's our nonprofit here. You can actually sign up to be notified of all the events that we're having. We'd love for you to do that. We're hoping more people across the country get involved, and we're trying to partner with some other nonprofits too, who are doing some awesome stuff for people with disabilities.
Well, something, as we progress and as your research continues on your end, because I'm going to continue mine as well, you are always welcome back to the show,
Thank you.
on these topics and on other topics as they come across your desk and your experience. So I want to thank you very much for joining us. I know it's a holiday weekend. Everybody wants to be out there enjoying the weekend.
Right.
So thank you for getting up early and meeting with me. So to everybody
Not
who,
a problem.
pardon?
I said, not a problem. Glad to do it.
Thank you. So to all my viewers and listeners and everything, to all of you, I'm hoping you're having a lovely Labor Day weekend, 2022, the end of the summer. And today is Monday, Labor Day. So have a terrific day, and I will see you all soon. Thank you so much to Tim Sutton. Thank you, Anthony, for doing all your magic behind the scene. Take care, everybody.